what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the EnteR ChatZ MaN Podcast, where, as always, this is your favorite place to hear all of the nerdy video game news that has kind of spooked us throughout the week. This is not a normal episode if you haven't seen so far. This is going to be similar to our kind of conversation with Ant-Man and the Wasp, where, I don't know, me and the guys just decided we wanted to kind of cover the finale for The Last of Us on HBO. So, what's going on, guys? How have you been?
I've been good. I have a lot to say about this episode. So I really want to talk about the final scene where, you know, Joel looks at Ellie and is like, I guess we really are the Last of Us. So no, I'm just kidding.
He said the thing. But I guess shoot, how do we want to just, did you guys like it? Were you guys like totally kind of rolling with where things were going at the end of this episode? The episode as a whole, I guess I should say.
Let me go first.
I can tell Phoenix is going to want to be the one to go last every time because of his game knowledge.
Yes, I liked it. I mean, I'm not going to say I didn't like it. I think there are definitely some things I'm hesitant to say messed up, but felt different enough from the game in ways that I think were pretty important. But it was good in the context of the show. I mean, without going into a bunch of details, I thought it was a solid episode. It didn't do anything detrimental, I think, terribly to the story, so they're still in a good spot moving on. So if you're just looking for, like, general feels on it, I liked the episode overall.
I felt it was kind of short, but then yet, you know, that's just me. When I
agree.
Like, when I saw the, 40 minutes? 45 minutes? I was like, what the hell? This should be, like, at least an hour and 30. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, I could have swore it was going to be at least an hour and a half, and I mean, they did hit all the big beats. There were some things from the game they left out, and honestly, the whole thing just felt kind of rushed to me. I'm not even really sure why, because it did hit the key points, and even like compared to the game, like I'm not too sure what they should have stretched out, but it felt fast. But we can get into why here in just a little bit. But yeah, the runtime I thought was a little short. I'm not sure if it was maybe HBO didn't feel confident by the time they got to the finale to give them a little more length, or if that's really all the time they felt like they needed, but even like a good hour-long episode, I think could have served this better.
Kind of similar to episode 8. I mean, from all the podcasts and other videos I've watched, most people think that this episode, similar to episode 8, could have been split up into 2. I guess apparently there's some stuff that's left out from the game, but from what I understand, most people have said it, you know, could have been anyway, so I don't know.
They left out one big event. I don't know if we want to get into that right now. They replaced it with some flashback stuff. So, I mean, the one event they left out, although I think would have been nice, I can get why they cut. I don't think they need a whole episode to do that event. I don't think they need 2 episodes. Honestly, I think that would have probably stolen some of the urgency, or it would have left it like a weird cliffhanger, kind of broken the continuity up a little bit. So I don't think 2 episodes is the right game plan here. I just think a slightly longer episode, like at least an hour and a half probably could have fleshed it out, but 45 minutes felt like they were just rushing to the finish line for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least make the shooting scene a little bit longer. Like after what? All right, so as you guys already know, I didn't play the game, but Phoenix sent me a video of the actual gameplay for the ending of the game, and so after the episode, I watched it. And I do agree, it could have taken down a few more people, like go behind some things. I did notice that, and I don't know if we're going into it right now, but I do feel like it could have been stretched just a little bit longer to give it a little bit more like meat and potatoes as like action, not so much of like emotion. Like they threw a lot of emotion in this.
I'm just with the emotion. And I don't know if we want to go too deep now. I think we should probably just kind of start at the beginning, kind of work there. Mm-hmm. But I agree, like that scene, that little massacre, is honestly probably the most pivotal moment in the episode, because that's the whole kind of turning point for Joel and all of it. And I think it needed an extra few moments to marinate. I don't know if that could have been done just taking a little bit longer, or a little, I don't know. Something about that felt too quick, and the turn didn't feel, I don't want to say didn't feel justified, but it just didn't give me enough time to kind of soak into that moment that was happening. But as in my perspective, is a little tainted just because I knew that moment was coming, so maybe I was expecting a little more from it just in that regard. But I don't know, I think we kind of back up. I think probably the best way to tackle this episode, unless Chaz disagrees, is kind of start at the beginning. I know you kind of have some character points kind of broken down, so we can kind of hit those as we go through, but I don't want to miss any of the kind of big talking points. So, Chaz, why don't you go and bring us into the beginning?
No, I felt like a good place. A good place to start would be with Marlene, because Marlene, like episode very much starts, with her and Anna, who, as it turns out, ends up being Ellie's mother. I kind of saw it coming, but I don't know. I don't think they were necessarily trying to hide it. But
Yeah, well, it's not there wasn't even enough time to really even ponder. Like, you see her, and then like she gives birth to Ellie. She's like, "Hey, Ellie." So it's not only supposed to be a secret.
Mm-hmm.
I did really like you caught that was what's her name?
Ashley Johnson.
Yeah,
the voice for
the
Ellie.
voice actor of Ellie in the game. That's one thing I really do like about this show is they've shown a lot of respect and appreciation
to reverence in a way, kind of.
Yeah, and it's not just to the source material, but literally the performances. Because The Last of Us, the game, I mean, besides just the story and the writing that made that what it was, the performances by Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson were really what kind of sold that whole thing home. So to give them that reverence and respect and kind of due diligence, to be like, hey, we really appreciate what you did, and brought them into this project. And even though they weren't playing their kind of flagship characters, I think it was kind of fitting that Ashley Johnson got to be the mother of Ellie in this, like, because essentially that's who she was, just in premise. So I like that. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, and I guess what I wanted to bring up for just for question's sake is, did you guys feel like that whole backstory section? Do you think it served Marlene well in terms of her goals and aspirations with what she's doing? Because technically, she's been in this world from the beginning. She's kind of seen people she's grown up with, seen what this apocalypse can do to people and what it does to children. And I'm just saying, like can you see it from her perspective as how, like, just being so desperate you're willing to do almost anything to end this thing the way it is, but granted, killing people, I don't know. You get what I'm saying?
Kind of. I mean, I think you're trying to say, does that little backstory, like flashback, justify her actions at the end?
Yes, that's pretty much what I'm saying.
I think it makes it worse. Because here's the thing, because now she had promised her best friend Anna that she was going to protect her child, and this is the complete antithesis of that. I mean, she has different loyalties, and that's fair. That's kind of the whole point of Marlene, right? She is in favor of the many over the few. So, but I feel like that almost tarnishes her as a person a little more, because there's just that human connection, loyalty aspect that is kind of tarnished, because she is directly choosing to break that vow to what is essentially her best friend, at least back then. And they don't go into a lot of detail here. To my understanding, her and Anna kind of went through the apocalypse together, like when it all kind of happened. So this is like a childhood friend. They've been through so much, and that she'd be willing to sacrifice. I mean, maybe that does speak to Marlene's character in a way, that she really would choose the many over the few. But I don't know. That makes me more against Marlene more than anything else.
Kind of reminds me of like the same idea of back in like Kansas City. Like there's a notion to it, but at the end, it's like, she has her one goal, and nothing's gonna stand in her way. And in this case, it's like, oh, get Ellie there, and to see her there, which I thought was surprising. I was like, what the hell is she? Like, really? Like, if that's the case, you could have taken her yourself.
Yeah.
Like, really? Like,
yeah, I think point being, she probably didn't think she would make it there, because I think last we saw her, she was in pretty bad shape, right? She had just been attacked or shot or something, so she probably thought she was going to die. So, I mean, you could give her that out, I suppose.
She did say that many of her men died along the way, and they wanted to know how the hell they did it. And, it's just, pretty much they watched each other's back. I mean,
yeah.
Pretty much all it was.
I mean, you could also, or sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I'm not sure if I really enjoyed having more. I don't know if I liked Marlene's character at all, to be honest with you.
Well, Marlene could also be like a case of like an example of just what what the apocalypse and what being desperate can just do to people in general. You know what I mean? Like maybe you're
more of like being cautious and making those quick decisions of whether a person needs to die or not because of this, crazy like pandemic that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I could appreciate Marlene's character. I can't say I necessarily agree or like her from like a personal standpoint, but I appreciate the role she serves and what her points of view are. So it's not that I dislike the character. I just don't agree with the character. But
yeah,
well, I don't think anyone would necessarily agree. I mean, well no, there are some people that do.
I mean, I'm sure that's where we're kind of going with this, but the whole point of the ending to The Last of Us that's been debated now for 15 years is just how ambiguous the ending is. Mm-hmm. What was right, what was wrong. So there are plenty of people who are in Marlene's camp, and they're like, yeah, Marlene was right and justified in everything she did. And then, of course, there's the other side that's very much towards Joel. And I don't want to go into that right now, but I mean, I think Marlene does stand serve an important purpose to represent that other viewpoint, which, the validness of what we'll discuss. Before we move on, I do want to mention one thing about the backstory that I don't know if I love. So technically, none of that was really confirmed in the game. Like, I know there were some like rumors and stuff as far as like Ellie and how she was born and all that kind of stuff. But it was never shown. You never saw any of it. So that's all brand new to the show, which was fine.
Which was fact that the Anna part is what you're talking about?
Yeah, the whole Anna stuff at the beginning. Like, some of it was, I think, dropped in like some notes and some logs. Like, you knew that she had died in childbirth. You didn't know she was bit. That's actually a really important thing that I want to come back to later. You just knew she died, and Marlene kind of took up for her. So that was fine. I kind of wish, though, they would have just stopped the scene right after Ellie's mom gave birth. I didn't really want to see the fall of Marlene. Like, I kind of wish that would have been left out. Could have been made referenced or mentioned that that's kind of how they came to be, but I think one thing I don't like about what this show has done is really kind of led you by the nose a lot and tried to answer a lot of questions that I didn't really need or want answered, if that makes sense. Like, and they do it, I think, almost to a detriment later on with a few things that I'm going to wait to get to yet. But
well, they could have done that with Marlene to try and have her garner more sympathy. Maybe
I think they were trying to, but I think it worked to the detriment of her character, as I said. Like, they were trying to show the connection between her and Ellie at a deeper level. But if anything, I think it betrays her humanity a little bit that she didn't, stand up for Ellie a little more. I don't know. I guess just in general, I don't like that the show is really trying to, like, not only just fill in backstory, but answer questions I don't feel like really need to be answered. They're kind of removing some of the ambiguity from things. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, sometimes it's better to leave some things left unanswered, especially in this show. This show, I don't feel like should be about the answers. And I feel like this episode was really heavy-fisted on trying to explain all these rational reasons why this and that should have happened. Like, they go into Ellie's immunity, which I don't like that. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I feel like part of what makes The Last of Us work is that a lot of it is open-ended. It opens some room for theory crafting.
Was that in the game, like the whole aspect of her immunity? Do they explain that it's because of the cordyceps in her brain?
No.
Ooh.
There's hints. They do explain some little bits and pieces, like, and there's a lot of rumors that, I mean, I think this was probably a big common, like, major rumor was how she was immune, that her mother must have been infected, something happened to her in childbirth, and that's part of the reason why she's immune now. So it's not that was a weird like outlandish thing, and the game just dropped some kind of little breadcrumbs to lead you there. But that was saying that was nice about the game. They just gave you the breadcrumbs, and it was up to then you as the viewer or the gamer to kind of theory craft it, think about it, rationalize it, and ultimately realize that doesn't matter. It's not about why she's immune. This whole episode, this whole story is not about zombies. It's not about immunity. It's about Joel and Ellie and their father surrogate daughter relationship and what, like, love does to you, right? You can do great things through love and terrible things through love. And the whole apocalyptic nature of it is just kind of the dressing of the show. So I think when this show gets really kind of ham-fisted and trying to tell you, oh, it's about this and that and this and that, I think they lose something because the game never felt that way.
It's about family.
Yeah. Vin Diesel should have been casted as Joel instead of Pedro Pascal.
That
would be horrible.
That would have been great.
I would watch it, though.
That makes me want to. There is something I learned on another. I'm not sure if this is positive.
Get The Rock to play Ellie. Just call him Elle.
I'm not 100% positive, but someone said on, granted, Angry Joe, Alex, a guy on there, said that he saw in an interview, kind of going back to your talking point of things being, the ambiguity. Apparently, Neil Druckmann said that in his mind, because a lot of people, like, the ambiguity kind of an aspect of it is whether the surgery would have even been successful or not.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that kind of, that yes or no could very much sway your opinion on whether what Joel did was good, Joel did was wrong. Apparently, Neil Druckmann in an interview has said that in his mind, it would have been a successful surgery. So he wanted to write that in and didn't, apparently. Which ended up being good, but apparently he thinks that. He thinks in his canon, in his head, it would have been a successful surgery. Which
and
that really...
fine,
yeah.
but that is to the detriment of this show.
Mm-hmm. This entire thing is not even about, like, good luck or anything. It's like, when there was a spark of hope, everything just went to garbage. Like, they should not... I don't know. I think it is a detriment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they...
Now, granted, I'm saying that...
It's a good idea to even mention something like that.
That's another thing I'm bringing up that I just heard on a podcast. So maybe Druckmann, but I'd have to go look at...
I'm surprised because that would explain why they got so detailed on the immunity and the doctor's understanding of the immunity. Like, I don't know if we want to go this far yet, because there's a lot of episodes before this, or do you want to jump to this portion?
Oh, no, we don't have to. We can hold on.
I mean, I will say, just in general, it's perfectly valid. Everybody, I think, has their opinion on it, if it would have been successful surgery or not.
I don't care what Druckmann says. It makes me feel better knowing it could have been
Well, the
up in the
point
air.
is that it could have been either. And you could believe it could have been successful. You could believe that it would have been, you know, a tremendous failure. And that then has direct impact on Joel's actions. If you know in your mind that the surgery is going to succeed, Joel is a much larger villain in this. If you don't know, if you leave it open to, you know, possibility it wouldn't work, which, in all honesty, I don't think it would have worked. I know I didn't write this story, but really think about it. You have these doctors that have, you know, probably minimal resources trying to make a vaccine.
Or in a rundown building.
Yeah, and I remember I watched some theory a long time ago, like, technically a vaccine isn't something that you can even produce from this type of disease. Like, funguses you don't get vaccines for a fungus. I don't know how scientifically accurate that is, but point being, the science wasn't exactly 100% going into this.
I'll bring it up.
There's a bigger chance it would fail. I'm sorry.
No, there's another point I saw someone on a podcast bring up, is that, like, technically the Fireflies are, like, kind of fascist and are very evil. So it's like, would they have even, like, done what people would have wanted? They probably would have kept the cure to themselves. Yeah.
They'll just take their own people and call it a day.
Yeah. Do you think they would have even, like, I had it phrased as, would the Fireflies have really played the good guy and dispersed the cure fairly? It's like,
no.
Everybody likes to be the hero in their own story. So from the Fireflies' perspective, sure, they were the moral good. But looking from the outside in, think about, I'm going to forget the names. Back in the city, the group with the Sam and...
Kathleen?
Kathleen, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, they thought they were right. And there probably was some moral truth to it, but we saw the direction that took when things didn't go the way they wanted, and they were trying to then find vindication or vengeance or whatnot. Who's to say that wouldn't be the direction the Fireflies took? It's all based upon, you know, who the leadership is and whatnot. And
I think everyone should have gone the way of David. Just go in that direction.
Oh man.
Yes. And
right.
end the story there. Everyone joins that.
Do you mind if we just kind of back up and kind of go through the story a little more sequential, and then we can kind of come back to that? Because there are some things I think that add some big context to that moment too, that the show kind of did better and then kind of did worse.
Well, this is our moment to reflect. I mean, go ahead.
So I mean, after, you know, they have the whole flashback scene, they have a little bit of time when they trek to the hospital, right? How did you guys feel about that sequence of events, getting from, you know, out in the highway to the hospital?
I think it's interesting how the first thing I mentioned to my wife was, man, he recovered really damn quickly. He's just springing along like it's all good with a nice wound. He's like, oh yeah, the antibiotics.
Not just a wound, like
that must be some good stuff.
Like a dangerously infected hole in his body.
Yeah, like that. That hole was probably like that big.
Well, they zoomed in on it and it was like oozing green. It's like,
yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah.
So in the game, at this point, I recall, like, one thing the game does to help you show passage of time is after big story moments, there's a flash on the screen that says, like, what season it is, like fall, winter, spring. So it feels like a lot of time has passed. The show doesn't do that. So watching it,
from what I've seen, it seemed like they used like the weather effects outside to show the different things.
Well,
because
you know why that
it's
is.
It's not snowing anymore. It's like something else. It's like,
and that's fair. I mean, they're trying not to be like super on the nose about it, where it just flashes up springtime.
Well, you know why that is though. Is you'd have to record at different times of the year.
Well, no, but they did have different weather effects, and you don't have to. They can add fake snow or go to different locations that are have snow when other areas don't.
I mean, they said it themselves. They went to Calgary, and they said it was freezing. Like they had the snow, like no problem.
I think the passage of time just didn't translate as well in the show. Like I think they really did try. Like you're right. If you look at the seasons that they're actually the weather that's around them, and if you think about just traveling from one location to another by foot, like clearly some time had passed, but the way the show moves and the pacing it has, it feels like the whole David stuff happened like yesterday, and now they're getting ready to go to the hospital, and I feel like that is very jarring because you're right. Like for one, you have this whole healing issue. Like technically, I guess there was time, but it didn't feel like that. And just even like Ellie's kind of emotional state is a little hard to kind of interpret because you don't know exactly really how much time has passed. Was this yesterday? Was this weeks ago? Months ago? It's a little hard to say.
Well, because how
it was taken. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying her position, like with her like not responding to Joel at all. It would seem as though like the David stuff happened a day prior. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
she's
that's
so
like a very
distraught.
fresh. Yeah.
And even then, like I mean, that could scar anybody. Like that was a pretty traumatic experience. I mean, anyone could get weird and be all non-responsive, even to funny jokes. Like Joel said some funny things that I was like, it's hilarious, and it's like, man, she didn't laugh about that.
Anyone can have have a crazy cultist get them in a burning room.
It's true. I mean, I've never been in that sick of circumstance, so I can't say, but I don't know. The way they're behaving though and acting does make it seem like that was a really recent event, like the past day or two.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas I think technically this should have been a week or two. Like, do you think they should have had a different kind of, conversational kind of interactivity if it would have been weeks that passed as opposed to days? Like, I feel like some of the interactions and dialogue they have that would have already changed a little bit over the past week or so. I don't know.
Like you were good.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I said even Joel's way of talking to her is even like he's dipping his toes into trying to
you about stuff.
So
he's also playing it safe now, trying to treat her like a daughter, which before he was just treating her like cargo, and now it's he's a lot more. Obviously she saved his life, so that changes a lot of things. Could have just left her for she could have left him for dead.
Yeah.
Like all those little experiences right there could have changed his mentality, and obviously that all led towards his decision towards the end. Like I think if it could have been weeks, it could have.
I guess this is my point. It's really hard to gauge. It's hard to gauge the passage of time like this. Like I feel like it should have been a fair amount of time, and the show just doesn't do a real good job really expressing that for whatever reason.
It wasn't freezing, that's for sure, because the episode before was freaking in the middle of the freaking tundra. So like there, it's like, okay, well, they went from there, and what is it to?
Well, because wasn't the highway was just outside of Kansas City still, and in a region near Kansas City all the way up to Boston. It's like I mean, how long does that take on foot? I mean, that would have to.
I'll Google
it. Not the time to Google that, but
I'm sure it'd be weeks.
Yeah,
months actually, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's a far walk, man. No joke. I don't know. I mean, I think they did try their best with the weather.
Yes, it's not that they didn't try. I just don't think it came across well enough.
I agree.
What did you guys think of the giraffe scene? Because that's like a big moment in the game. So I'm curious how well that landed.
The giraffe scene? What do you mean?
The giraffe scene.
Oh, giraffe. I see. Said draft. I was like,
it was a nice
draft. Where Ellie wants to join
join the Fireflies.
She wants to join.
Was that a real giraffe or was that a CGI?
It was both apparently. Apparently they had for like some of the close-ups, they had a real giraffe that they fed, and then there were perspectives that was CGI. The CGI wasn't too bad. I mean, I feel like there are spots I could tell, but there were definitely other spots I'm like, that looks pretty good. Did it have the emotional gut punch?
Yeah, it did. I thought it was interesting as well how Joel decides to just explain his suicide nonsense. You know, like he
wasn't that the episode prior?
No, he talks about it this one.
He does it
right after the giraffe scene.
Yeah, but I think the giraffe scene was pretty neat. It was very
oh, that's right, his ear. Okay, sorry.
And it kind of showed a beauty where they're in the middle of nothingness. You know, destruction and devastation everywhere. You know, there's like it doesn't affect the animals. It's like, oh, that's nice.
So I have. Oh, I just wanted to say, like, I feel like, in my opinion, that whole giraffe, that whole scene, for me, it should have been
dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs.
See Brontosaurus is walking through, and all of a sudden,
should have been like Dino Riders.
What?
You just see somebody riding a T-Rex going by.
Yeah.
You see a cane with an amber on it, with an amber mosquito.
I'd watch that show too.
No, I just wanted to say that, like, for me, the whole aspect of seeing life, like, to me, that whole imagery, the representation of Boston, that one specific section, to me, felt very representative of, like, there can be life can bloom, life can like, nature can almost in a way kind of revert, you know, it can
finds a way.
Life finds a way. Always thanks. Always goes back to Jurassic Park. But to me that was very representative of, like, things can fix themselves without the cure. Like you get what I'm saying? Like, I don't necessarily think, like, the cure was 100% needed. To me, it was more, I don't know.
Well, it was for humans. Like, for humans, life would continue.
Yeah.
Would human life continue is a whole other issue. But no, I get what you're saying, and I think that was part of the point, is that, you know, life will continue one way or the other throughout all this horrific nonsense. So.
And also, I guess, kind of tying into that, I also had a point when it comes to Ellie of, like, of her not necessarily being, like, she doesn't have to necessarily be the cure. I had it phrased similar to the Veil of, like rather than necessarily going out of the way of possibly killing her, risking, because she is immune, right? She and you would risk killing your subject that's immune for this surgery, isn't it?
No tests, with
no tests,
anything,
exactly.
No time to even think about it. Just like, let's chop her brain up.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Like, wouldn't it also, I have it phrased, couldn't blood samples, along with seeing how her offspring fared in a controlled habitat over time, also present critically important information for the future of the human race? It's like,
no,
like,
it's a
her
children
are possibly
more
important.
With the immunity, and then they could look at the DNA. That's like, there's so much more they could have done than just cut her head open. But
I don't know. Maybe I'm moving too far ahead, but that makes me think of, like, you know, tying back to the cure. Like, you don't, like, there are ways that things can correct themselves. Like, I feel like the cure is, like,
people build natural immunities too, and you're right, like that then gets worked back into society. So the cure is just
instant gratification. Like, I mean,
they need an objective. I mean, that's what they want. They need, like, this thing they're going to seek out, which was the cure. But you're right. Just like with any disease that we've ever had in human history, like, sometimes there is a medicinal cure that's created. Other times it's just we as humans get exposed to it. We develop natural antibodies, and then we grow immune to it over time. So that's potentially what would have happened here, regardless. So.
And I guess you could also make the argument that in this post-apocalypse, there are no, like, real scientific facilities, so there aren't really people around that would think like that, you know, I guess. I don't know.
Well, but the Fireflies are one of the scientific, and I know this is jumping ahead to knowledge.
Are they
of the
really,
game.
though? There was, like, 4 doctors.
If you take knowledge from the second game, they are fully funded, like, they're like a whole civilization. Like, they had plenty of knowledge and science backing it up. So, and if on anything, that gives credence to what they do. But we're jumping a little too far ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Unlike Fedra, they're a bunch of guerrilla warfare.
Exactly. Well, yeah, I was just curious how you guys felt about the giraffe scene, because that was like a big moment in the game. It felt a little flat to me, but I think that's partially because I knew it was coming. So there's probably nothing it could have done to really have that same impact anymore. It felt a little rushed getting there still. I think it's just, in general, I felt like this episode felt rushed. But it's good to hear that it still had some impact.
All of my favorite... sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's the part where she mentions that she's willing to continue forward, right?
Yeah, right after the giraffe.
Well, because Joel gives her the option of saying, like, you know, we don't have to do this. We can just turn around and leave. And Ellie's like, no, we have to see this through, finish what we started.
Yeah, like there's already a conviction there, and it already shows it. Like she's willing to do whatever it takes to finish the mission.
Yeah,
and I think that's like, and now as I was talking about this last night, I was like, I wonder like if that was her mission the entire time, and she kind of came down to that conclusion. At this point, that's where morality comes in on whether Joel was right or wrong. Because really, at the end of the day, she already mentioned that she was willing to do it.
Well,
the missing piece was that they didn't say there was surgery.
So yes and no. I mean, I think most people would agree that Ellie would have died for the cure. I think that's understood. But she never officially said that. She said we have to finish what we started. We have to get there. But then she was also like, but afterwards I'll do whatever. So there wasn't that initial, thought of, oh, I might have to die for this. So although, yes, she would have died, I think she would have chosen to that. That wasn't 100%. Now, that does get to the moral part, which I think we can talk about here in just a minute, but it wasn't 100%. I do want to say I really like the Joel suicide story. That was not in the game at all. And I think that was an interesting way to kind of show him finding a way to heal after his daughter. And especially the one line he said, oh, where was it? Wasn't time that healed me, it was you. Like that, just like, oh my goodness.
Well, it's also like
so good.
There's also like the comparison of like of him kind of turning heel on his suicide, whereas Ellie almost in a way is heading into hers. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I guess there's some connective tissue when it comes to that. Although you're right, I don't.
Going to hers. You talk about what
she's
what they're about to do.
If she lets them do what they're going to do, it's basically her giving herself up for the cause. Even though I agree with you, I don't think she necessarily.
Very different rationale, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so one other thing before we get to the hospital stuff, because this is where they have one big thing they cut out of the game. So in the game, after they have the little conversation about Joel committing suicide, like I love you, Ellie, and all that kind of stuff, they didn't have the Fireflies attack them in the game. Like that's not how they got to the hospital.
I was going to ask about that. That didn't seem right the way they did that. I think I don't know. I didn't play the game. Obviously, that's not the part that you showed me.
Is this?
But it seems so often they would just get freaking pretty much just like slapped in the back of the head.
No, but in the game video you sent us. She says the same thing. My guys didn't know you were.
Okay, let me hold on because the Fireflies do find them, not like that.
I see.
So after that section, there's basically a big gameplay stretch. They go into the underground and they have to like sneak past some clickers, and it's basically the last big gameplay section before the finale.
Clickers?
And I get why.
What are those? What are clickers?
Clickers?
Yeah.
You're kidding.
I'm kidding.
Right.
Yeah, I'm kidding.
Just making sure.
Because there was only one. You only see.
That's true. And that's one of the things they cut so many zombie.
There's almost no
moments
zombies in this entire episode
because they're all shown during the gameplay of the game, and like the show very much removed the gameplay out of it. Which, to be fair, that's where the story's at, right? So I think for the most part, were justified. But yeah, it does make the zombie aspect of the zombie apocalypse a little moot. But anyway, they go down, they sneak past all the zombies, and then, if I recall correctly, there's like this underground flood in the subway, and both her and Joel get messed up pretty bad. They barely make it out of there, and I think Ellie's like unconscious at that point. Fireflies find them then after they're like.
Say that really fast.
Fireflies find them then. Anyway, they find them after they're pretty much like knocked out, unconscious, etc. Like in the game, Ellie has no idea they ever made it to the Fireflies. Next, after Ellie gets knocked out from this flood, she wakes up in Joel's truck at the end. So keep that in mind. She has no idea she ever even makes it to the Fireflies.
So I don't. But the thing is that she didn't even know. She gets taken, but that's it.
So
she doesn't know.
Yeah. So this is one of the biggest differences that I think changes the feel of the game versus the show. So when Ellie gets brought into the hospital from the game, she is unconscious from the very beginning, has no idea what's happening to her. They never talk to her, ask her, tell her anything. She just most of the ending plays out like we saw, but she just then wakes up in the truck at the end. So there was never an opportunity where Ellie was awake the way they talked to her. Whereas in the the show, she's awake. They mentioned that, oh yeah, Ellie's fine. She's been asking about you, Joel. Like, it's very clear that Ellie is okay and awake. And they even said very specifically that, oh yeah, we're going to need to have surgery. They mentioned that, but they never mentioned it's going to kill her. They're just like, we need to go and do this thing. So this is where you get from straight up lying to her face to lying by omission, if that makes sense. Like, in the game, they still didn't do, I think, Ellie justice by giving her a chance to say anything, like she was knocked out. But it's a little more ambiguous, at least, because she was never awake in the first place. They just kind of took her and did their thing. In the show, though, they had her awake. They had a moment to ask her, tell her, explain, and they straight up just lied to her. And I think that is a really big difference. I think a lot of people are missing right here.
Well, because Joel could have just said they never made it to the Fireflies, or there was nobody there. If that's the case, and,
well, she woke still up like in hospital garbs and whatnot, so she knew something happened.
Well, fair enough.
But she didn't know she was at the Fireflies, but she probably would have assumed. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think that makes a really big difference because it changes kind of the moral sway of this a little bit. Like, once again, that's the whole point of this ending, is how you kind of draw the line between what Joel does versus what the Firefly does. And this, I think, is a real big negative towards the Fireflies, because it went from them just being like, once again, lying by omission, which is still bad, but, you know, you could argue, okay, maybe Ellie couldn't have woken up. She was unconscious and she wasn't going to wake up in time. I don't know. But she was awake here. They never mentioned it. They lied to her face and just let her go into the cutting room floor without any kind of understanding that that was the last time she was going to be alive. That's a big knock to me towards the Fireflies, and any, like, I don't know, argument against, oh, well, Ellie would have chosen to do this on her own. If they felt that way, they should have asked her, right? If they were confident that was the direction she would have played. So, I don't know. That was big change number one.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. That is funny. I mean, at the end, it's like, if in the game that she didn't know anything about it, I wonder why in the heck they did that then, if that was the case. Like, they could have easily just, like, played that part. All they needed to do is, like, keep the
because
whole
they I don't feel like they believed that. I don't believe they felt that Ellie would have 100% agreed. Like, although I think she probably would have. Like, Marlene even says at the end when Joel's trying to run away with Ellie, like, you know she'd want to do this. That seemed really hypocritical, because if she really felt that way and knew that, she should have asked and would have asked Ellie during that time where they had the opportunity to. So something about that lands really off to me.
I don't think she would have done it.
And maybe not. That's the whole point. Like, we can all discuss if she really would have done it. I think she probably would. And also thinking about, you know, stuff in the second game, I think she probably would have. And the other line too, this is something else missing from the game. Missing from the show. At the very end, I'm not going to go into all of it, but when Joel and Ellie are having their final conversation, Ellie gives her conversation about how she got bit with Riley and Riley was about to die, etc. In the game, though, there's a line that if you don't catch it, it goes by really quick. She starts talking about all the people she's lost, Riley, Tess, whoever, and she's like, "I'm waiting for my chance." She thought she should have died with Riley, and she was waiting for her chance and for something to have meaning. So that was her answer right there in the game. Like, she basically said, "I would give up my life for something that has some meaning." But the problem is, even though, yes, I think that was the answer, that was never a definitive going into the surgery. And Marlene in the show never gave her that opportunity either. Neither did Joel. Joel stole the opportunity from her as well. Like, even though you could think he was saving her life, he was also taking her agency away at the same time. So it's not good either way, but I think it definitely weakens the Firefly standpoint a little bit, that they straight up just didn't even give her the opportunity to ask when they clearly had that chance.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe the way things kind of ended with Marlene too. Like, I I guess you could make the argument, would Ellie have cared how that, if she ever found out how things ended with Marlene? I don't know. Technically, that was like her surrogate mom.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that gets mentioned in the second part too, right? Like, I think there's.
I don't remember it being a big point.
You mean the game part 2?
Yeah, like doesn't the and you don't have to say yes or no, but from at an accidental, peek at something, there was some sort of mention that she pretty much figures out or finds out that he lied to her in her face.
Ellie does find out, but the Marlene thing, no. So I'm trying to recall, but in the game, like when she wakes up in the truck, she's like, "What happened?" Joel just says, "The Fireflies, we got there, everything. They had already found other people that had immunity, and nothing panned out." He never said anything happened to the Fireflies. He was just like, "It didn't work out. They don't need you, Ellie." She didn't even know Marlene was there. Remember, she never saw Marlene. She was knocked out the entire time. In the show, though, she knows because Marlene had her awake, and she specifically asks about Marlene. So that's a new thing from the game. Yeah. I don't think in the game she really knew that Marlene had been killed, or maybe that wasn't a big talking point.
In the show, he does mention, and he goes, "Yeah, the Raiders came in, and they."
In the show, he does, yeah.
Yeah, in the show, he does, and I thought that was a really strange white lie that he threw in there.
Well,
it's like, wow, it's really interesting.
Well, he needed to explain since she was awake. Her being awake changes so much about this because now she has some kind of context about who the people were. She'd probably met certain doctors and scientists. So to just then wake up in a truck after that would feel really weird to not have any kind of interaction with any of the old Fireflies. So I think saying that they were slaughtered was basically a way to be like, oh, no one was there to answer any questions. We had to get out of there really fast. But with her being unconscious, she just had no idea. There was no context added to it. So, I don't know, her being awake changes a lot about this. I don't think has really been understood yet, but it changes, I think, some of the moral swayingness of this. Joel's lie is worse because of it. Like, it's just worse.
Yeah, like, nothing is right about any of those decisions, anything that was done.
Well, Joel...
taking her away wasn't even... I don't even think it's the right thing to do either.
But
then at the end of the day, I mean... He's lost so much, he doesn't want to lose the other thing that he, for months on end, I guess, months.
Well, that's what I was gonna piggyback off of, is that he didn't want to lose her, and selfishly he didn't want to lose her in either way. He didn't want to lose her physically due to being experimented on, and he also didn't want to lose her by telling the truth, because who knows, she may have hated him afterwards and didn't accept that and may have disowned him, you know what I mean? So either way, he wanted to make sure she was in his vicinity either way,
It was selfish. I will say, and I'm going to jump into a little bit of Last of Us 2 spoilers just for a minute, because there is a moment where Ellie finds out about everything that happened and confronts Joel. And Joel basically says, like, you know what? I did it. I would do it all again. Even because he loses the relationship with Ellie. When she finds out, they are just like Splitsville the whole time through. And even after all that, he still says, I would do it again. So you're right. I don't think he wanted to lose that relationship with her. It was more important to keep her alive. That, like, he would have severed the relationship knowing she was alive than anything else. And honestly, if I was in the same boat, if it was my daughter, although it would break my heart both ways, I would rather know she's alive than, even if I had to never see her again, if I knew she was alive and safe, that would be enough for me. So
it's like you actually save somebody as opposed to
he saves his daughter again. Like, that's a big thing for him. It's selfish, but it's a big thing.
It's been a very common theme throughout most of it, but he was a parent and still is a parent. He's, when it comes to kids, sometimes you tell little white lies or whatever. I mean, you tell them Santa's real and there's a tooth fairy.
He's being a parent. He's
apologies to some people.
He's trying to protect her, and to be fair, I mean, parents lie when they shouldn't lie. I mean, it's what happens. Sometimes you don't have a better solution in your mind, and you are weak in the moment, and you say things you shouldn't. So I mean, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but it is very much a parent characteristic to think you're protecting somebody, and sometimes that regard pertains to not telling them the full story. And I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but it is kind of the nature of things.
And technically, wasn't Marlene lying to her anyways? Because did she ever know Marlene knew her mom? And that she raised her and everything. It's like
no, and I'm not sure if in the game she did either.
So Marlene was lying to her anyways either, and she was.
I mean, Marlene
both sides were lying. It's not like anyone's side was completely morally good in this whole thing.
But she's been torn and ripped back and forth consistently. So it's like, at the end of the day, it's like she's all messed up.
Well, that's what. Yeah, in my notes, I did have it under Ellie as a. Did you feel Ellie's backstory with Anna and Marlene was a good backdrop for Ellie's mistrust of Joel at the end? Which again, kind of like, as I was saying, she's like you said, Danny or MetalGamer Danny. She's being lied to on all fronts, and it's like, does she have I mean, I guess maybe my question is not right because she doesn't know she's being lied to by Marlene. Marlene probably just never told her any of that. Which
she's been manipulated the whole time.
I would think that would tick me off more if I found out you knew my mom. And
yeah, and that's the kind of thing. And she'll never find that answer out now, right? At least not in any kind of meaningful way where Marlene could serve any kind of repercussions from it. So Joel's the only one who serves anything to lose by finding out that he lied to
Marlene
her.
had a lieutenant though. It was a lady with no hair at the beginning of the season. Maybe she. Oh yeah. Maybe that
she was just gone. Yeah.
She's just gone. What's her? I have her name.
She wasn't real important to the game at
Kim,
all. I didn't know.
There's a Kim was her like lieutenant. She might know.
I don't know how important she was. Maybe. But I don't know. So the only other point I want to mention, we kind of already talked about it, but we're kind of at that point. So in the game, they don't explain why Ellie was immune. They don't really know. There is an assumption, something along the lines of, oh yeah, the cordyceps have mutated in her brain, and that's possibly why she's immune. They give a lot of possibilities, like this is probably why. And I guess what you're saying, like maybe Neil Druckmann didn't do the job he wanted to make that clear enough, because he certainly tried to overcorrect here, because now there's almost no possibility. They're like, oh yeah, we know from childbirth she developed this immunity probably because her mother was bitten. And once again, now Marlene knows that. I think that's the other reason why I don't like them showing Marlene finding Anna there, because that's a piece of knowledge now that solidifies the Firefly's approach. Because not only is it a theory that, oh yeah, she could have been mutated from childbirth, Marlene knows that. She saw the result, so she knows very much, yes, that is accurate.
Oh, because the mother was bit. Oh, I don't know why.
Yeah.
Okay.
So credence has now been added in a very heavy sense towards the Fireflies. Like, although I still am not 100% convinced that it would have succeeded, if you're looking at it on paper, it looks pretty good, right?
Well, that's why. A theory. That's why it makes sense. The thing I brought up about Druckmann saying in his mind it would have been successful.
Yeah. And man, I don't like that, because now this is. I mean, I was trying to knock down the Fireflies a little bit with them, lying to Ellie's face. But now, if you are looking at this at a point of many versus the few, and you want to, if you're assuming yes, this is definitely going to save, or a vaccine's going to come out of this, he's pretty much just handed that up on a silver platter, because they have a technique or a procedure that is going to work pretty much. Like, it comes across like almost 99% positive this is going to work out. They know the theory, it's verified with Marlene, and they even have an approach for how they're going to take the cordyceps out of the brain and find a way to vaccinate and all of this. Like, that's a lot of credence to what they're saying, and that now really hurts Joel. Like, any ambiguity you had about Joel maybe doing the right thing is lessened a lot, and I don't like that, because the whole point, at least when I played the first game, was that you could have pretty valid feelings going either way. Yes, they should have killed Ellie. No, they should have saved her. But now I think the weight is very much placed on, no, Ellie should have died. And I'm assuming that's what Druckmann wanted. And going into The Last of Us Part 2, I get that that's probably the direction he wants. But I feel like that's a detriment to this overall story, because that's what's been so fun about discussing it for 10 years, is that anybody can be right, right? Now I feel like there's kind of a wrong answer here. I mean, I can still have my personal feelings on it, but I mean, argumentatively, if you're trying to go, yes, this is going to save the world essentially, and I'm going to be the one person to prevent that, that's kind of a short kind of ground to stand on.
And that totally kind of turns my question I have here on its head is, since you were saying it seems kind of definitive that it would have been correct, I had the question of, does Joel essentially play the villain of this episode, and do you have any empathy for the Firefly's perspective? But yeah, seeing as how it would have been successful, that Joel essentially doomed the entire
and it also has
human
major
race.
ramifications going into Part 2 now. because, and I won't go into the plot of part 2 in a lot of detail, but there's some stuff that goes down, and the justification now for what happens is a lot more weighted towards those who are against Joel. I'll just kind of leave it at that. Whereas before, once again, yeah, Joel did some terrible stuff, but you could get some wiggle room there. Like, well, he did it because of XYZ. There was no guarantee, but it's changed. It's shifted the whole perspective going into part 2, which once again, I'm sure that's what they wanted. I'm sure that's what Druckmann wanted for whatever reason. That's the story he wanted to tell. I just don't like this story nearly as much. Granted, it's not my story, but I don't know.
Yeah, who are you?
Yeah, I'm just some guy on the internet who knows nothing.
The guy who talks about Pokemon RCS.
Oh, can we go back to talk about that? I want to.
We should.
The Last of Arceus.
Oh no.
So I guess we basically touched on everything I had. Anything else you guys had to add?
Well, there are the big 2 plot points are still left. So you have the whole massacre scene after, because there are actually a few points leading to that. So I know MetalGamer felt like it didn't land right. It felt too short. The firefight at the end. Yeah.
So after watching, I mean, that was a 20-minute video, no joke. Either that or just, they could have. First off, when Joel decides to go against them, they're in the stairwell, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, in the game it's right outside the room, and then that's when the massacre starts happening. But then he goes through a whole ton of areas to be able to try to avoid over, make Molotovs, do whatever in order to get to the area that he needed to go. What's
talk about in the game, right?
Yes. What's interesting though is that the guy in the stairwell, which is in the show, didn't tell him any information. The other guy did, and the one that in the game did tell him exactly where to go.
He does tell him stuff. He says, "Keep moving."
That's what he's saying. Like in the show, they did tell him. In the game, they don't. So I guess it makes sense why it would take longer in the game to get there. Is that where you're going?
No. It's the other way around. In the show, they didn't tell him. He goes.
Oh, you're right. The game does tell.
Off, and then he just shoots him right there. It's like, really? That's right. In the game, he goes top floor to the left. It's like, oh crap! He just gave up the coordinates just like that, and he still killed him because that's what Joel does. He doesn't give a crap. But that gave him the right of way to go where he needed to go. How did Joel need to go there? It's just like, oh, okay. Well, he's just. It's like, okay.
Yeah. It also makes it more believable that everything that Joel does happens on one floor. Makes it more believable. It would have been easier for him to find that room, whereas in the game they're going down stairwells, and it's like that's a hospital's a big place.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's the other way around because he had to go up different floors in the show. While the game, he was in the same floor.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's on the game, but
in the game.
Looking around, going to the pediatric center.
Yeah.
They caught that pretty good, actually. The pediatrics. I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. And they kind of got it there, but it's really strange how they could have gotten away with a little bit more violence. I mean, the last episode was so gnarly.
You're sick in the head. You want more violence in a post-apocalypse.
They at least made it a little bit more gruesome. They made that pretty bad.
I don't know if it's the lack of violence that got me. I think this is where the game. Here's the thing: it's always be hard to replicate the pacing from a game to a show because the pacing in a game is your pacing, right? How you progress through it. So it's always gonna feel and land differently. I think what makes that scene really kind of lose some impact in the show. Once again, this is the big moment in the whole game, right? Because up until this point, Joel has pretty much been straight up protagonist, right? I mean, he does some gnarly things, but he's still protector, good guy for the most part. This, you're now taking on the role of slaughtering this whole facility, and when you get that what do you say, objective in the game, there's a lot more weight to it. You're like, oh crap, what am I doing? And the pacing is actually very internal because you're like, do I want to be doing this?
Well, the game,
in the show, you don't get that.
The game, like you said, the game makes it feel as though he's being hunted. The show makes it feel as though he's running everyone down and hunting.
And it's a little bit of both. But the whole point is like there's a lot more weight to what you're doing in the game because you're doing it as the player. There was a quote I read. I was looking through some other reviews. I think it was like The Atlantic or something that put it, but the guy said the show just can't replicate the frightening wonder of actually pressing the buttons to doom humanity in the name of protecting your feelings. Like the show can't replicate that. Because once Joel flips, like all you see is Pedro Pascal going on a rampage. Okay, you understand why he's going on the rampage, but it's not you going on the rampage. In the game, you have to take some onus of it because you're in control of Joel. And then when you get to that moment, we have to kill the doctor. Like in the show, it's like bam, bam, doctor dead. Give me Ellie. I'm out of here. In the game, though, like that moment takes as long as you want it to take. Like I remember when I first played, I was trying to find a way not to kill the doctor. Like I was okay, I got to kill all the soldiers. Get here. I get to the doctor moment, like okay. Is there a way I can like shoot the scalpel out of his hand or knock him over and feel like he's okay? The game forces you to kill him. No matter how much time it takes, you have to slaughter the doctor. And that moment has a lot of weight to it that the show just doesn't have.
His rampage also, in the show, also makes it seem as though Ellie's not the main goal. Whereas in the game, you can just jump over it looks like you could just jump over those walls and avoid people for the most part. Like when he closes off that door, there's still people following him, but he's not killing them because he's trying to get to Ellie as soon as possible. In the show, he just massacres everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much of a pacifist play you could go through in the game. I think to a certain extent, I think you probably have to kill a few of them, but you're right, you could try to be a little more pacifistic, I think, avoid some guys, but it comes down to the moment with the doctor. You're forced to kill an innocent person who's standing in your way. Well, okay, innocent, but you get what I'm saying, right? There's just a lot more weight that comes across in the game that is lost in the show, and I'm not sure if they could have done anything differently, to be honest. I don't know if there's a way they could have shot it differently, framed it differently to make you have some of that onus, but thinking it's a show, right? So I guess they weren't trying to make you feel like you were the character. It's watching this other guy, and I think that kind of takes some of the specialness out of it. There's a lot of shows that, you know, they have kind of the anti-hero that do terrible things for whatever greater good they feel like, right? But few of them have that personal connection because they're not games. You're not interacting with it.
Pedro is 360 no scoping everybody.
Oh yeah, no, he was tearing people up.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
I don't know. That was a big difference. That I just felt like the game, it just carries more weight. No matter how you look at it, the game is more weighty and has a more personal impact because you are the one running through and taking people out. So.
I did want to just have one more point, is that for Marlene, it's like, it was, to me, came off as very dumb, where like she's in the room with him having this conversation and she makes it a point to tell him, or she even questions, she's like, how did you get across the country doing this? You know, you're amazing. She says something like, she's like, she couldn't have done it herself. You're amazing. You know, I knew you were the right guy for this job when we got you here. So she goes through all this to tell him how much of a badass he is, just to like turn around and be like, now escort him out of the building. And it's like,
I think it's even funnier. It's like, not only escort him, but if he tries anything, kill him on the spot. It's like, are you serious? Like,
don't bind his hands. Just politely walk him outside. Yeah.
I mean, you could look at that as her trying to give him a little bit of respect for what he just did and understanding. I guess they were trying to maybe add a little bit of humanity or understanding to Marlene, but I agree, like,
you know what he's gonna do. I mean,
yeah, from a militant standpoint, that's a really bad strategic decision. And for someone who is very much about making the hard decisions, it seemed like a loose thread that she probably should have tied up. So I agree. I think that was a little odd that they even bothered. Like when she saw that he had a conflict about what they were doing, she didn't just neutralize him right there. Because you're right. I think they would have known he would have went crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So
instead, she had to go Austin Powers, Dr. Evil.
Mm-hmm.
With
I need to see them. No,
with Seth Green. What are you doing? Just kill them now. All right. So I just had a couple last few questions. So we had compared to the game what was different and why was it better or worse. I feel like we've done a pretty good job of going through that.
I will say it was pretty similar. Like 98% of what they did was the same, but the couple of big changes we talked about, I think, have some big kind of ramifications. So
yeah.
small changes, but big changes.
Yeah, I think the 1% though, which they'll never be able to get, is just like you said, the feeling of playing it,
Mm.
and getting that, personal conflict within yourself on whether you want to do it or not. I don't think it's something you can, like you said, you can't capture.
And it also makes Joel feel a little more morally good because he's you, and you don't want to be the bad guy. So you're trying to justify his actions a little more. So I think just playing as him tries to make you rationalize his perspective a little more. Once again, it adds to the ambiguity just a little bit.
Mhm.
The show just kind of wiped away the ambiguousness of it just a little bit. Like, I think most people are going to watch this and probably side with the Fireflies, at least more so than they did before. Like, Joel comes across pretty deranged at the end. Like, as a parent, I think most parents are gonna probably agree with Joel, but still feel like, yeah, that was a little much. But I'll tell you, if that was my daughter and she was strapped to a table, I'd take everybody out. Yeah, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care about the rest of the world. So that might be a bad thing to say on the internet, but it's true. I'd go for my daughter.
Do you think that if he would have gone through with it or whatever, do you think he would have gone the direction of what's his name, Sam, and Henry just go ahead and just kill himself?
I think you would have been David.
Oh, you're talking about if she. So you're saying if they would have killed her, what he would have done?
David is a horrible thing to call somebody.
He would have just been guilty or regretted and then kill himself or something. Because then he would have.
I think he probably would have. He already said he had already, contemplated suicide before. Losing your daughter again, I don't think he could have done it. I think he would have ended things, but.
I mean, he said it towards the end where he was just like, if there's something worth fighting for, you go and do it, and that's the one thing that he did say.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though Ellie doesn't seem to quite get it,
I don't think she would have.
To fight against, fight for.
She wouldn't have sacrificed herself. All those conversations, especially just prior, I feel like a lot of the things he was telling her was about keeping on, stuff like that.
I think she would have sacrificed herself. Are we asking like what Ellie would have chose to do?
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
You could ask that.
She would do it. Well, as I said, there were several lines of dialogue. The one I mentioned earlier actually comes at the very end when Joel and Ellie are having the last discussion. Remember, she's telling him about Riley and all that. She says she's waiting for her moment. And granted, I'm also looking at this from the perspective of some things that happened in 2, but even then, I think she's pretty clear. If she had to die, she was okay with it. So it's not that I think it was a question so much what she would have done. It's the fact that nobody gave her that opportunity to say what she would have done. And even though, yes, the Fireflies technically would have probably went the route she wanted, is that still okay? What's the moral thing to do here? If by happenstance the Fireflies were doing the thing she wanted, does that make it morally good? Or is it always morally bad because she was never directly asked? And both parties could have had, well, I was going to say both parties had the chance to, but I guess Joel never really had the chance to ask her. Marlene did in the show, which makes it a lot worse. In the game, neither of them had a chance. And that's why I think what makes it more ambiguous. Like, once again, she was unconscious. Fireflies couldn't ask her. Joel couldn't ask her because they were kicking him out of the hospital. So,
and
I don't
she
know.
Was on drugs.
Huh?
She was on drugs at the end, so she was all passed out and stuff. So
yeah, so even, that's something to keep in mind too. Even if she was conscious in the show, in the game, they didn't want her conscious. Period. They never wanted to ask her the question. They wanted her knocked out, ready to be chopped up, so they could do whatever they wanted to. So there was never a chance in either one of these mediums that they were going to ask her what she wanted. They just assumed.
I was saying,
that would be it.
Was Joel right for not leaving Marlene alive? Because I think he was right when he said you would just come back for her.
He was right. They would hunt. She would hunt him.
Yeah.
Now, is that the right thing to do to kill her? And
I wouldn't say it's. Man, I wouldn't say it's cold blood, but
it's not cold blood. She had a gun. She had a gun on him, technically.
Yeah.
Yeah, like she was gonna do it, but she the thing is that she
mercy at the end. Essentially, she was surrendering, but that doesn't mean you're right. She would have come after him. So, I mean, that's a very militant choice you got to make. Like, you're making a strategic decision on: are you going to have to deal with this person down the line, or are you going to show mercy now? Which is, and many people I think the more moral choice to let her live, but it's not the most strategic choice.
She would have gone after her, hands down.
I'm fully convinced. I think Joel made all the right moves. To me, this is totally indoctrination theory realm. I'm not looking any further. I think he made all the right choices. I don't think Ellie would have sacrificed herself. I don't know. I'm happy. I'm happy living in my world.
I think even if she would have sacrificed herself, I still think Joel
would have stopped
her. Not that killing anybody was the right decision, but trying to get her out of there, I think was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Like, she should have a chance to, one way or the other, say, I want to do this. Like, and technically, there is still the possibility of her being able to save everybody. Like, I know they killed off that doctor, and there's some lost research.
Well, you just said there's more. You said they're a great organization with a bunch of scientists.
Like, and even if you don't know that, you can probably assume if an organization like the Fireflies does exist, there is probably another organization in some facet somewhere else that probably has a similar capacity to do research and experiment and find a cure. Okay, so I think what Joel does that's not good is straight up lies to Ellie at the end. Doesn't tell her what happened. And just kind of keeps the whole thing hidden. I think that's probably, in my opinion, his biggest failing. If he would have told her and just said, look, they weren't going to give you the opportunity. They didn't even give me an opportunity to ask you. They were just going to do it. And then you could argue, okay, if she would have been okay with that or not. But that comes down to a I had to save you kind of thing. You weren't given an option. And then if she decided, okay, you know what? I do want to go ahead and sacrifice myself. He could then go and find someone else, right? Their whole quest now could be, let's find another organization, and he could support that. Now, would he support it? I don't know. Clearly he wouldn't, because he lied to her at the end. So that's, I think, Joel's biggest failing, is that he never comes clean and kind of comes at this with a very selfish viewpoint of, I just want to keep my daughter essentially alive.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know.
Yeah. What's crazy is that in the show that he keeps the two nurses alive. Yeah. That's something that sure, he did a massacre, but he kills the doctor, but he never kills the two nurses.
He only kills who's in his way.
Yeah, and he said turn around, and that was it. And he took the girl and ran, and that was. Well, he left a couple in the show. He left a few people. Now in the game, that's a different story. I mean,
but in the game too, that's also up to the player. I think the player could have left the nurses.
What's up?
That's also up to the player, though, how many people you kill. I think the nurses could have been spared. In the video I sent you, I think he killed everybody.
Yeah, he killed everybody. Like, he killed all the nurses and stuff. It was pretty hilarious.
I feel like you only have to take out the doctor at the end. So, and that, once again, is, I think, somewhat of a point towards Joel. Like, at least in the show, he only took out those who were.
That surgeon would have lived if that surgeon hadn't been confrontational.
Yeah, if he would have been like, yo, I'm out of here, things would have been cool. But no, he grabs the 10 blade and wants to come at him. So.
What was he going to do? Yeah. He got a scalpel versus a dude with a gun.
Yeah, well, he was trying to stand on what he thought was moral good. So, I mean, I don't know. I think Joel's biggest failing is lying at the end. I mean, I could probably sit here and justify most other things, but that's the worst thing he does to Ellie. And honestly, that causes her, I think, some major, psychological issues down the line. Because the last person she trusts, she knows lies to him. Like, when she says okay at the end,
she
knows he's lying.
She knows he's lying, yeah.
And that sets up the whole second game and whatnot, and that causes just so many other internal issues. So, as I said, that's Joel's failing. If anything else, I'm still on Team Joel, ultimately, just because if that was my daughter, I would have done the same thing.
Now, have you heard...
I don't think I would have lied, though. That's my only thing.
Now, have you heard what...
I would hope I wouldn't lie.
Yeah.
But, man, that's a big weight to tell... I'm trying to think if I could tell my daughter that I just slaughtered 100 people to get to you. I mean, she'd love that. She'd be like, good job, Dad. But they're also in a world where slaughtering people or killing people for protection or defense is the norm. So, I don't know.
I think it's more along the lines of, if she knew what he was doing and how many people he killed to get there, knowing that it was for that specific cause, then that's when things would have been a little bit different.
Yeah.
Like, are you serious? Like, you could have just left me there. Like,
there was at least a way to resolve that, I think. Like, he could have justified it. She could have not forgiven him or had an issue with it, but if he could have came clean at the end, I think there was a easier track to redemption. Because once again, there could have been a path where they come to terms and he now helps her serve whatever purpose she thinks she needs to do, knowing that she has to die. But with this, he has stolen that choice from her just as much as the Fireflies did at that moment. Prior to that, I'm Team Joel. That moment, that's where it gets a little hazy. But Anyway, you were gonna say something, Chaz?
I was gonna say, so I believe there's been 2 updates as for season 2. I believe one of them is definitely confirmed. The other one I'm not positive on, but I'm pretty sure it's been confirmed. Is
You're a clicker.
Yeah. No, they basically asked Mazin and Druckmann as to whether they would bring Bella Ramsey back to play Ellie, and he basically said if she doesn't want to play it, then we won't bring her back. So basically I guess they've kind of confirmed she'll be back to not play an older Ellie, but they still seems like it's kind of open. You know what I mean? Them saying it that way.
From the phrasing, I read that tweet too. If Bella Ramsey chooses she doesn't want to come back, they'll recast.
Which it's like,
but why wouldn't she?
She come back? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that's the right choice? Like, do you want to see Bella Ramsey play that character again? And because assuming they go into part 2, which is like 5 years later, I think. Like, it's a decent enough jump, and she's aged quite a bit, noticeably.
When Bella recorded this, she was probably like 19 or 20, so probably about as tall.
She's already 5 years older, considering.
Yeah.
She is not going to naturally look any older or more mature by the time they film the next season. Like, you assume, it's going to be another year and a half before we see the next season, sure, but she's not all of a sudden going to gain 3 inches and get, some extra wrinkles in her forehead or anything, so... I don't know. Are you okay with that? If she just looks the same?
I think her acting was great. I mean, so at least if you bring her back, you're not taking a dip in the acting realm, I guess. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it.
So, I mean, I agree she did a great job for a child actor.
She's not a child actor, though.
Well... Okay, that's a fair point.
She's like 20. I think she was like 21 when she recorded this. I'll look it up. I want to be sure.
Way to say this. The performance that Ellie had in the game, just the voice, came across more mature. The reason I say child actors, because I know in the game, like, it was voiced by Ashley Johnson as an adult, and I feel like there was a little more nuance to that. But you're right, Bella Ramsey is not a child.
She was 19 when they recorded this. Or no,
which is still young, to be fair. I don't know. I'd want a different perspective on older
she was
Ellie.
Probably 17 or 18 when they recorded this. So she's 19 now. Yeah. I thought she was older.
Ellie in the second game versus Ellie in the first game, they feel very different. Because I mean, a lot of time has passed, and once again, a lot of knowledge has changed too. And not saying that Bella couldn't do it. I think I'd like to see someone else. The nice thing is the second game does have a lot of flashbacks to younger Ellie. Bella Ramsey could still stick around for all those flashback scenes and still be a part of it, and then have someone else older Ellie.
Just have a.
That's something.
Let's say just have a CGI Ellie, like Leia, and what was it? The third or fourth?
I'm
kidding. Don't do that.
Point being, I also think that's gonna be weird if they do cast her as older Ellie and they still do those flashbacks. You're going to have her playing young Ellie again and old Ellie in the same thing. So, can makeup do enough? I mean, makeup artists are pretty talented, but can they do enough to distinguish her to do flashback scenes as young Ellie and an older, more mature, and not like incredibly older. It's not like they can just add wrinkles to her. They have to make her look like she's in her, early 20s or something like that, or late teens, where she's supposed to be now. I feel like that's a bit of an ask.
I feel that they could do something. Even if it's not makeup, they could probably even CGI it or something.
They could
probably even deepfake the damn thing.
Yeah, but with deepfake technology
is better, but it's not perfect. Like, I mean, I don't know if we all saw, but we saw Luke Skywalker in what was it, the Boba Fett thing, deepfaked. Yeah, he looked okay. Didn't look perfect. I couldn't watch an entire show like that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying they couldn't do it. I'm a little weary or a little hesitant of it. And I'll just say that. Nothing against Bella Ramsey. She did a great job in this show. And she probably does have the chops to do it. I kind of feel bad for even saying that, she had a child performance with it because she is an adult and she did a good job. But my gut wants somebody different. I don't know. But I could be wrong. I'll leave that open to see what happens.
And I believe I'm not positive, but I believe the other thing I wanted to bring up is that I think it's all but confirmed that the second game is going to be 2 seasons. So that
I think it would have to be.
Yeah, so it'll be, once season 2 will be the first half, season 3 will be the second half of the second game.
Yeah, I would imagine. What do you say, Metal?
A more emotional, gut wrenching, tear your heart out kind of stuff.
I don't know if it's that. Like, part 2 is very much, it has 2 halves to it, to be honest. Like, I think there's some very clear lines where they could do a season 2 and a season 3 in it. I was a little unsure how they'd do the entire first game in one season, but kind of seeing now how they've cut out gameplay, I see where they expedite things. But Last of Us Part 2 was a really long game. Like, I think the first game was,
It was
I
like
don't know,
30,
11 to
35
13.
hours, I think.
The second game was. The
Second
first game was
yeah.
like 11 to 13. And if you cut out all the gameplay, you pretty much get what we have in the show. So, 9 hours, okay? But in Part 2, that was like a 30-plus hour game. Even if you cut out all the gameplay stuff, you're left with probably 20 hours worth of stuff. That's about 2 seasons, so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess just real quick, I just wanted to ask you guys, excluding the video game, which I believe me and Gamer at this point have a small understanding. Phoenix has actually played it. I wanted to see if you guys could, I don't know, from 1 to 10, rate this season. Because I would be curious to see how Phoenix, who's played it, versus us, rate how much we liked it. I want to see if he's lower than we are. I would assume you are.
Find out.
Interesting.
So
After these messages, just kidding.
So in my head, I would say somewhere between an 8 and a 9. So I'd have to see, do I want to do 8 or would I say a 9? I would go as far as to say a 9. I would say I very much enjoyed it. It's not perfect. I'll stay 9, but maybe tomorrow I'll think an 8. I don't know. I'll say 9.
Show some commitment. Good job.
No. What about you, Gamer?
Okay, so
If I had never heard of the game, this would be incredible, I should say.
knowing that some of the pieces of what the game had to offer or whatever, because I'm watching it from a viewer standpoint, I have to get for me it was a solid 9. I was looking forward to it.
Okay.
Every Sunday.
Okay. 2 9s.
Like even then I had to watch it on a Monday, but I was really looking forward to it.
We're lucky we have Phoenix here to downplay,
Ruin
ruin everything.
He's probably gonna go I give it a 5.
Is that 2?
It's a 3.5, solid 3.
0.5 Rotten Tomatoes.
I'm gonna say you're gonna give it a 7. Go ahead.
I'd give it an 8.
8?
Yeah.
Okay.
I liked the show. I liked the game better. And not that I think and to be fair, I'm not the biggest Last of Us guy. It's not I'm not one of the guys Last of Us 1 was a perfect 10. It was a great story. Even back in the day, I'd probably give it on its own an 8 or a 9. But in comparison, that's where the difference is. On its own, the show, taking into account all the stuff it does and the differences it kind of goes for, it's still an 8 because they don't do many things.
What would you have given the game? You given it a 9 or a 10?
I want to give it a 10. And here's the thing: I would never give the game a 10. To me, it was never a perfect game. The gameplay actually in the game is not great. The story is what makes The Last of Us. The story and the characters and all that. So for that, I would probably give the game on its own. I probably would have given it an 8 back in the day. If I'm comparing the game versus a show, I would say games up here 8 or 9, shows 6 or 7. If I'm doing a comparison, but on its own,
compared to other shows you've seen recently,
for both their mediums, they are both high quality, right?
For
the
above
game,
average.
I would say 8 or 9. For the show, 8 or 9. They're both great. I don't agree with the changes. Part of it might be because I played the game and I have that stuck in my mind. But I do feel like there are some things that just aren't as good in the show, the lack of ambiguity at the end. The ending's really what changed it for me. I think if they wouldn't have added some of those extra little nuggets of information that sway them, yeah, I probably would have. I probably could have got past some of the pacing issues and some little just little pieces here and there if they didn't change some of those big things. For one, the fact they straight up said how she was immune. That changes so much. That's probably the biggest thing they changed, just saying how she was immune, because that shifts your perspective on who's right or wrong in that final conflict. And what made the game so good from a narrative standpoint was you didn't really know. And the show, You still don't really know, but you kind of know, if that makes sense. So both are great. I don't think you're going to go wrong watching the show. I still recommend, if you've watched the show, go play the game. There is going to be a lot of similarities. There's enough there. And the Troy Baker, Ashley Johnson performances are different, but really good still. And I think you'll find some different nuances there that you're not getting from the Pedro Pascal versus Bella Ramsey.
If only there was like an easier way to play the original game. If only there was like a couple remakes.
That'd be great.
They've remade that. I'm joking. They've remade that game for like every modern PlayStation console.
Yeah.
So
well, that's why they put it out for PS5. Like, a lot of people were like, "Why are they remaking this again for the PS5?"
Because the show is coming
the stupidest
out.
thing. But then they're like, "Oh, by the way, Last of Us show is coming out," and everybody's like, "Oh." So, yeah, still play the game. It's not a real long game. I said 10, 11, 13 hours. I don't know exactly what it was, but there's enough difference there that I think you'll appreciate things from the show maybe better. Maybe you'll appreciate things from the game a little more, but it's worth still playing. I am interested. I don't think I'll go back and do it, but I am now more interested in looking back at the story of Part 2. Like, I played through it. I didn't hate Part 2 like a lot of people did. I didn't love all aspects of it because it got a lot of hate, but I am now wanting to look back at it with a different lens.
Well,
to kind of see what
I'm willing to admit my perspective of 2 is different than most people because I watched a Let's Play as opposed to actually playing it. So I definitely think, seeing as how with this season, or with this show, I decided to watch it before I played it, I think with the next one I'm going to actually play it first. And then, because honestly in the next few months I'll probably play through the first and second one. That's probably going to be my next goal, is to knock both of those games out, having said so I could say I played them.
Yeah, I definitely recommend play the first one.
I will.
Even if you don't play the second one, play the first one. It just gives you a whole different feel in the relationship between Joel and Ellie. And I think we had talked about this when you watched 2, because you came across real negative because you just watched the Let's Play. But what makes
gameplay probably makes it more entertaining.
It's not really the gameplay. What makes Last of Us Part 2 lean one way or the other is your understanding of Joel and Ellie. Like, you came into it like not having any real connection to them that I understand. You'd probably watch a Let's Play of Part 1 and do some pieces about it.
I didn't even watch it. I just played the first hour of the game or something.
Yeah, so to have an opinion on Part 2 without going through Joel and Ellie's journey, you're missing just so much context. Like, you'd probably even be fine now that you've watched the show. You at least have an idea what that relationship is like. But, yeah, you miss out on so much watching or playing 2 without playing 1. It's not one of those games where you can just play Part 2 and not Part 1. They need to be done back to back.
Yeah. Cool. And I guess the only... this is going to be a hard question, seeing as how me and you kind of know something. But my main thing was just like, where do you hope next season goes, and is there any room for further growth between Joel and Ellie? I mean, I don't know. That's kind of a loaded question, but again, it's hard to answer with us knowing. But
yeah, I mean, this show is probably still going to follow the games really close. I would actually argue, I think it's going to follow Part 2 even more closely than it followed Part 1, because Part 2 is a lot fresher. Neil Druckmann made that after having a lot of feedback and thought after Part 1. So I think when he did 2, he was really clear about what he wanted. I think the show has actually been a way for him to kind of go back and revisit Part 1 and tell the story he always wanted to tell with a few changes. It feels like George Lucas special edition kind of stuff, right? Where he tweaked enough of it so now it's going to fit better with his future vision, which is what Part 2 is. I think Part 2 is going to play out pretty much identically, maybe a couple of changes. And I don't think I can explain anything about Joel or Ellie's relationship without major spoilers for the upcoming show or game. So maybe I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Alrighty, well, shoot, that's almost an hour and a half's worth of Last of Us content. Overall, I think it seems like we all very much enjoyed it and are looking forward to season 2. Who knows if production has even started yet? I would assume they probably have.
Pre-production would have. I'm sure they're probably, writing scripts, getting things and check boxes in order and whatnot. I don't think we'll probably go in production for another 6 months to a year, and then a year and a half from now we'll probably see it.
I think they said the finale of this show blew out the HBO's record for most views. I think, but surpassing Game of Thrones like by far or something.
So before we wrap it up, I do have one last question, because one of the big kind of crazier selling points about this whole show is that this is the best game adaptation ever, right? Would you agree with that?
I mean, I'm biased, but
there's quite a bit of game adaptations that suck. So, and I guess I haven't seen enough to give a good one, but I'm gonna say from the ones that I've seen that were horrible, yeah, I thought this was pretty good considering. I want to say it's the best, knowing the information I know now about the game versus movie, but at least the series, but at least they're doing their best to keep it true to the game.
Are you saying
I think that's the most important part about it all?
Are you saying best, or what is the most faithful adaptation?
I'm not saying faithful, because
Okay.
a good adaptation doesn't mean it has to follow the game one-to-one. Like, it has to translate well to the new medium, hopefully still have reverence and respect for the source material, but I think the way this was handled, I mean, I think... I don't know, you give your opinion first, Jess.
No, I've said it, but I'm very biased. I still think Mortal Kombat, the 1995, is probably my favorite video game to movie adaptation or TV.
The first one,
the first,
the second one.
But
No,
if you're looking at it,
not Annihilation.
so I can understand for like nostalgic purposes and just like your own personal preference. But if we're trying to be like objective, like if you had to check off boxes for like quality, writing, this, that, is this objectively?
It's the Tom Holland Uncharted movie. That's the best. No, I'm kidding.
Oh man,
Don't get metal started. Don't do it.
Oh my god, don't get me started.
Isn't that incredible? Just thinking about that in the same, within about the same year, Naughty Dog had like the worst to like the best adaptation.
Yeah.
I think, and you know what? And I think that's the reason why they had to make this one good, because
To make up for that one.
so bad.
Yeah.
I'll tell you my feeling on it. Although I do think objectively this was a fantastic show, I kind of feel like it's easy mode because this game already was a movie.
Yeah,
like,
they already had all the meat and potatoes. They didn't have to do anything but translate everything over.
Here's the thing: they didn't actually translate much of the game. The gameplay aspect of it was barely here. They just took what was essentially the cutscenes from the game and acted them out, and it wasn't.
Then they took liberties to skew it a little bit to make it more intense.
Well, not
for people to watch it.
Not to defend myself, but to me that gives more credence to something like Mortal Kombat, because it's like if you look at their source material, it's like they made, in my opinion, a good movie out of that versus, this show played it safe. But it feels great because the game was great. So it's like,
It's hard to say they played it safe. I said it was just like on easy mode.
Yeah.
Like they would have had to try to mess it up. Like technically, it is a game adaptation. Quality-wise, it checks off all the high bars. So if you're looking at it just from a paper standpoint, objectively, yes, this is one of the best game adaptations ever made. But when you think about the game they're adapting, it was barely a game to begin with. And I hate to say that because, games are such a broad thing, but the gameplay, at least in the first game, was adequate at best, and they cut out most of it in the show. It was just the narrative. Granted, it was acted amazingly, but you could do that with other stories too. Like, I don't know. I guess that's my issue with it. It is an objectively great show. It's a very easy game adaptation, but I'm not saying it doesn't deserve any credit either. So
I think they were missing one thing. Goombas.
Oh, Goombas. John Leguizamo.
Now that could end up being objectively the best video game movie. If this new Mario movie pans out well, because then they will have had to actually take gameplay elements, old narrative, lore, like converting Mario into an actual movie is a big, tall order. They've already done it once, and it didn't go well. So honestly, I think if that lands well, that in my opinion would be objectively the best.
If this show, instead of Pedro, they should have gotten Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt as Joel would have been epitome of Joel.
It's me, Joel.
It's me, Joel.
I still want to see. Have you guys seen the SNL sketch with Pedro Pascal and the post-apocalyptic Mario?
I sent it to you guys.
I think I saw it before that, but I don't remember sending it. Either way, if you haven't seen it, Metal, you should. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Pedro for
All
the
right.
win. Pedro's been on a roll.
Good for him. He did well. He did well.
Alrighty. Okay. Well, that's everything. So I guess we're gonna call it there. Anything you guys say before we take off?
I'm gonna crawl into the attic now. Bye.
Adios,
So I
everyone.
assume we're still doing our scheduled podcast next week. Is that the plan?
Yeah.
Not sure.
Yeah, that should be. I might be over there, so we might be able to hang out together.
Nice. Nice.
I'm noticing
A
OBS is
live.
OBS is
version.
freaking out right now.
Uh,
Or no, I
Get-
mean
get us a
Discord.
chair.
Oh well.
We're
We're
gonna
good.
need some chairs and maybe some macaroni and cheese pizza.
All right. Sounds good, guys.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, guys. We love you. Oh, what good timing. Someone in chat is asking when my next Dragon Ball video is going to drop. Great.
We told you that those anime roads are gonna
That's
be awesome.
fantastic. Someone in my chat is... This is good, but when's Dragon Ball?
Did he even say this is good, or just like, hey,
No.
loser, get back to your
It
real
says...
bread and butter?
To watching anime, bro.
Demons187 in chat. Your Dragon Ball videos were good. Are you going to make any more Dragon Ball videos?
Gotta make some Hunter x Hunter, bro.
Thank you so much for joining, Demons. I am actually working on that. So, stay tuned.
Don't be all cagey like that, man. Don't even give the one viewer who turned in some love and tell him what you're doing.
I am. No, I love you, Demons. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I was actually watching Dragon Ball
I'll tell you,
Z.
he doesn't.
He doesn't love anybody. He only loves himself.
I'm Joel. I'm selfish. Alright, well, that's it. We'll see you guys on the next one. We love you. Adios, everyone.
Bye.